Welcome to on Public Issues. I'm John Chowning with our special guest today, the Honorable Michael Adams, Kentucky Secretary of State. Today we're discussing some recent changes and the upcoming June 23rd election. Welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, I've been in office for 4.5 months, and it feels like 4.5 years. I know every Kentuckian feels the same way. I think about their lives right now. It's been quite a year, and it's only May. But I will say I'm glad that I have the experience that I brought from a career in election law and service on the State Board of Elections. I'm glad I was able to come into this role at this critical time with some experience and knowledge, fortunately.
Why was it necessary, in your opinion, to delay the Kentucky primary until June 23rd? And then related to that question, what are the primary offices, principal offices that are on the Kentucky primary ballot coming up?
Well, I'll take your second question first. We've got a U.S. Senate race. Both parties have primaries. We've got U.S. House races. Some of those have primaries. We've got state representative and state senator. We've got lots of primaries in those races. Certain jurisdictions in our state have local races for mayor, for city council, and so forth. So it's a lively election, lots of folks on the ballot. The governor and I made a decision on March 16th to delay the primary election date. State law gives us the ability to jointly agree to change the time, place, or manner of an election. To put this into perspective, on March 9th, I was on KET for an hour-long program talking about election law and policy. Didn't get a single question about coronavirus. And just a week later, I'm standing next to the governor at a press conference announcing that we've delayed the election by 5 weeks, the maximum we can delay an election under state law. That's how quickly the coronavirus issue spread. In that week, you had, of course, the NCAA men's basketball tournament being canceled. You had lots of disruption to society and a realization by, I think, all of us that things have changed. So we made that decision, number one, in the hope that the coronavirus would go away. Obviously, that didn't happen. Our other rationale was, well, look, if it doesn't go away, this gives us 2 months, at that point, 3 months, to plan for what election day will look like and how we can accommodate voters and not let Mother Nature disenfranchise them.
I might note to our viewers that we're doing this interview via virtually and via Microsoft Teams. So if there are any glitches in it, we'll blame it on the technology. And a slight delay in the questions and responses between here and Frankfort. Now, related to yours and the governor's decision to delay the primary election by a few weeks because of COVID-19 pandemic, you also reached an agreement with Kentucky Governor Beshear on the methods of voting that would be followed in the June 23rd Kentucky primary. Share with our viewers those major provisions that you and the governor agreed on and in the respective executive orders that were issued.
Sure. So first off, the governor and I, we come from different parties. We have different ideologies. But on a couple of things, we agreed. Number one, we wanted to make sure people get to vote. And number two, we wanted to make sure they were safe. So we went in with similar goals for our negotiations. For me, the most important goal was to avoid what happened in Wisconsin and Ohio. In those states, you had brinksmanship, you had branches of government against each other in court. You had Democrats against Republicans in court. And unfortunately, the rules of the game ought to be partisan one way or the other. And they weren't decided until the last minute by judges. And the voters didn't know what the rules were going to be until election day. They were told the election was on, then off, and on again, and off. That's not fair to the voters. That disenfranchises people. So it was important to me to reach an agreement with the governor and show the whole state that we're being bipartisan, that the rules are fair, the Democrats and Republicans agree to them, and to reach an agreement months in advance so the rules would be clear for all Kentuckians. So here's how you vote on June 23rd. We gave you 4 options. We didn't take anyone's rights away. We respected the constitutional right to vote in person at the polls. It's a sacred right. But most folks don't know this. The right to vote absentee is also in our state constitution. The right to mail in a ballot is also in our state constitution. So here's what we did. We made it possible to have 4 ways to vote. You can vote in person on election day. We're discouraging that because otherwise we're going to have crowded polling sites. We've had to reduce the number of polling locations. We don't have as many locations volunteering to be open for the polls. And of those who would volunteer, most of them are not capable of social distancing. We've got to keep people 6 feet apart, the poll workers and the voters, to make sure we don't have more transmissions of this virus. So number one, you can vote in person, although we discourage that. Number two, you can vote in-person absentee, which is to say early voting. Every clerk in the state is going to offer early voting no later than June 8th at their office. So that way, instead of showing up at the polls on election day and waiting in line for hours, you can call and make an appointment with your clerk, and you can go in and vote on-site in person early. The third way you can vote is you can vote absentee ballot by mail. You'll be able to get an absentee ballot by calling, emailing, or faxing your clerk, or going to an online website that we're about to unveil and applying there. It'll be mailed to your house, and then you can mail that back, and we're covering the postage. The fourth way to vote is absentee ballot that you personally deliver. We don't allow ballot harvesting in our state, but we do allow voters to personally deliver their absentee ballots to the clerk's office. So if you don't trust the mail system, if you're concerned your ballot will get lost and you want the personal satisfaction of hand delivering your ballot and dropping it in the bin, you can also do that. So we gave people 4 options.
Now, there are those who have expressed concern, as always. There is that in Kentucky as well as elsewhere, the concern expressed about the potential for increased election fraud with expansion of mail-in balloting and expanded absentee balloting and so forth. What measures are being taken to maximize ballot security and the overall integrity of the election?
Well, I would submit that there is no one out of 4 million Kentuckians who's tougher on ballot integrity than I am. I'm the only person who spent 21 months of my life traveling the state talking about ballot integrity. I'm the only one who's written and gotten into law a photo ID to vote bill. So obviously ballot integrity is very important to me. Here's some of the steps that we're taking. Number one, we're not just mailing out ballots to the registered voter file. I think that would be very unwise and even absurd in our state. That might work on the West Coast where they've got cleaner voter rolls, where they've got less of a history of election fraud. But here in Kentucky, that wouldn't work. Our voter rolls that I inherited when I took office January 6th were found by a federal judge to be out of compliance with federal and state law. We've got people on our rolls who shouldn't be on our rolls. So I'm in the process of getting them taken off. But right now, we just simply can't mail ballots to everybody. So number one, we're requiring people to apply for a ballot, and that requires proof of identity. Whether you're emailing or calling in or over the web or faxing in your request for an absentee ballot, you're going to have to prove your identity. Number two, the ballot envelopes are going to have barcodes so we can track them. That enables us to track the ones that are issued and the ones that are received back and to look for any abnormalities or anomalies. Number three, we're matching signatures. Every voter who votes absentee ballot has to sign the envelope. And we are matching those signatures against either the application or an absentee ballot that people fill out by hand, or if they register online for an absentee ballot, they have to consent to provide their driver's license signature. Not everyone has a driver's license. We respect that. But those who give us a signature by giving us consent to get their driver's license, we've got an MOU with the Transportation Department so we can pull all the signatures on file with them on driver's licenses, and then we can match. So number three, we're going to match signatures. Number four, I'm going to have more to say about this in the next week or two, but you're going to see an active law enforcement component to this, investigating potential fraud. But we're very closely tracking addresses that request multiple absentee ballots. We're very closely tracking people who haven't voted recently in many years, suddenly requesting absentee ballots. We're tracking those on a regular basis, and we're cooperating with law enforcement to look at anything that looks shady. So this is not the sort of vote by mail system they have on the West Coast that the president has criticized. This is a very high-tech, sophisticated effort to ensure ballot integrity. So
there are a number of built-in securities and extra efforts being made to assure the integrity of the election process. It sounds like it from the explanation you have shared with us. Now, in-person voting, as you mentioned, I think opens up on June 8th. Is that correct?
Yes, early voting June 8th with the county clerks, and then election day on June 23rd at multiple locations.
Explain briefly how that works, Ms. Secretary.
Well, I'm someone who believes in federalism. I believe in local government being better than state and state better than federal in terms of being responsive to local situations and conditions. So in the agreement the governor and I reached, we delegate to the county clerks to come back to the State Board of Elections with their plans. Those plans are being considered now. None has been approved. So anyone who's saying out there that so-and-so county is just going to have one site or 4 sites or whatever it is, 6, none of that's final yet. We're reviewing those proposals, but we're deferring to the counties to come back to us. Here's what they have to do. Number one, they didn't have to reduce the number of their polling sites, and here's why. As I said, we don't have enough locations that are volunteering. We don't have enough poll workers who are volunteering. It takes 3,600 voting locations and 15,000 poll workers to have a traditional election. We don't have remotely close to either of those numbers. We also don't have enough PPE for all of those locations and all of those workers. So we've got to significantly reduce those, but it can't be, in my opinion, as few as 1 in a big county like Jefferson. I just think that's not enough. So we're looking at these plans. We're going to have discussions with the clerks to finalize those plans, make sure these locations can enable social distancing. We're trying to move away from the touchscreen machines also. We actually have used federal dollars to buy new scanners, buy more paper. For this reason, number one, we're going to have more absentee ballots cast. Number two, we are trying to get away from people touching the device over and over again on election day. We don't want people touching screens. What we want them to do is to use a paper ballot with a disposable pen we'll give them to use and throw away to fill out a ballot that we can then run through a scanner. So we're using federal dollars to buy new equipment for these counties. And that's actually a silver lining to all of this. I actually have been advocating to move to 100% paper ballots anyway. That way you relieve concerns voters have about electronic hacking. You relieve concerns voters have about the machines malfunctioning and not counting every vote cast. You've seen those concerns on the left and on the right. So I thought it would take a decade to move completely to paper ballots. We may be there in my term now at this point because of the aggressive move to get rid of the electronic machines that in some cases have actually been decertified as obsolete by our neighboring states.
That is a very good step forward, as you well know from your experience as an attorney and now as Secretary of State. The voting systems without paper trails are an increasing point of concern around the country. So it would be good if Kentucky ends up through this process without any systems that don't have that paper trail.
Yeah, if I could add, it's not just a hackability concern. We had, I believe it was half a dozen races for legislature decided last cycle by a handful of votes. 1 vote, 2 votes, 5 votes, 7 votes, very close races. And in some of these counties, you can't do a real recanvass to recount because there's no paper trail. So it's not just a matter of fraud or hacking, it's a matter of getting an accurate count. If you're that person who's going to wear your life running for office and you lose by a vote or 2 or 5 or 7 votes, you want to know the vote was right. You want to be able to go back and check the paper, and we'll be able to do that now.
Very good. Voters are going to be receiving a notice, as I understand, by regular mail of the expanded options that are being offered to vote by absentee ballot. When will that notice be going out, and will that come from the state board?
It will be coming from the State Board of Elections in Frankfort. It will be going, they're in the process of going out this week. They should land in mailboxes across the state next week. Every registered voter will get a postcard. That postcard will explain in brief this process. It'll direct you to the website, excuse me, where you can apply for an absentee ballot. It will also give you the phone number of your county clerk. And then you can call your clerk for an absentee ballot, or you can make an appointment with your clerk to vote in person early, or you can learn from your county clerk where they're going to have election day on June 23rd, where the locations are.
Now, as I understand, the state is also establishing an online portal where voters can go directly to that portal. Is that correct? Explain how that will work and when that will be available.
I hope that by the time this program is posted and airs, it'll be live. I'm hoping it'll go live in the next day or two from today, May 21st. But the postcard is going to have a link to this website where any voter can go, plug in their information. Again, you have to prove your identity. We can't just be mailing ballots to every mailbox in the state. But you prove your identity, you punch in your date of birth and your social security number, and if you have a driver's license, that as well. And then we'll verify your identity, and then we can mail you a ballot. We'll actually have your clerk mail it to you, but we have a central receptacle for information in the State Board of Elections website.
You touched on this question, but I want to zero in on it a little bit more because, again, it goes to the validity and integrity of the process that is going on here, explaining the protections that you use to verify identity and validity of each voter and his or her ballot, and then to protect that the ultimate counting and integrity of the outcome of the election.
Sure. So we require everyone to apply for a ballot. I've actually gotten some pushback from the left on that, but you got to have controls. You got to prove identity if we're going to have confidence in our system. So we do require people to either sign an application. It's just basic information, who you are, where you live, your date of birth, and your social and your driver's license number. Again, you don't have to have a driver's license to vote, but we do ask for that. You can either sign that document and we'll compare your signature on that application to the signature on your absentee ballot envelope, or you can request this to be mailed to you, or you can apply online. Either way, you're going to provide the same information so we can verify your identity before we send you a ballot.
Mm-hmm. How do you respond to some people, some observers who think that you may have gone too far in cooperating with Governor Beshear and allowing this expanded absentee and mail-in voting in this primary election? What say you, Mr. Secretary?
Well, a couple points. Number one, what I'm doing was supported unanimously by the State Board of Elections, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans. It's supported by Republican and Democratic county clerks around the state who actually have to run the elections. And it's modeled on what my colleagues who are secretaries of state in other states, including red states, including Republican secretaries of state, doing in their states. Actually, my version of this plan is more conservative than a lot of what they've been doing. So no one, I'll tell you, no one who's been critical of this plan, I certainly welcome constructive criticism, but no one's come up with an alternative to what we're doing. A lot of people are complaining, but no one's offered an alternative. They've said, well, you can go to Home Depot, you can vote. Well, okay, but there's not a Home Depot in every precinct in Kentucky. And there also aren't people on the payroll who are willing to put in a 12-hour day at every polling site. Home Depot staff are not disproportionately senior citizens, but that's true of poll workers in this state. The vast majority of our poll workers are people who are of advanced age and need to be kept safe right now and are not volunteering to go work a 12-hour day and be surrounded by thousands of people they don't know. So there's been lots of criticism, but none of it's been thoughtful or constructive. No one's offered a better idea than what we've offered. And I'll be very honest, I don't have 100% confidence that there won't be anything that'll go wrong. Anytime you rely on thousands of people across the state, you're going to have human error. It's going to happen in any election. It will happen here. But I honestly can't come up with any better ideas, and nor is anyone else, in the proposal that the governor and I have agreed to.
What is your best estimate, Mr. Secretary, at this point in terms of the expected turnout in this June 23rd election?
Well, it's really hard to say now. I may have a better sense in a couple of weeks once we launch the new website. Once the clerks have gotten more requests for absentee ballots or requests for appointments to vote early in person, I'll have a better sense. But here's what I can tell you: a couple of things. Number one, states that have done what we're doing, which is pretty much every state that's voted since mid-March, they've actually seen turnout stay the same or go up. You've seen the increases be greater in the Democratic Party because the Democratic voter on average is more comfortable with the vote by mail system. It's actually part of their part of the Democrats' platform. They actually like mail-in voting, so they feel more comfortable. I've got a real challenge in rural areas, destigmatizing absentee balloting, so that Republican voters won't skip election day or otherwise crowd the polls and get sick or get others sick.
What will you and the Board of Elections be looking for in terms of any early signs that there could be issues or problems in this election?
Well, we have a valuable partner in the National Guard. It's purely voluntary whether a county wants to benefit from their services. Some counties don't. It's really up to the county and their local culture. But they've been a great partner with us too. So we're bringing in their help on logistics. We're bringing in law enforcement help from around the country. I'll have more to say about that later. So everyone's been good partners. We all have different roles. As far as the Board of Elections and me, here's what we're focused on primarily. We're tracking where these absentee ballots are being requested. We've got the ability to tell if there's an address that's gotten multiple requests for an absentee ballot. We've got an address, for example, that had 41 requests. So we pulled them up, found out who they were. It was a nursing home. Well, that checked out okay. You want a nursing home to request absentee ballots for obvious reasons. But we're checking those folks out. We're also checking out voters who've requested an absentee ballot who have not voted in several recent elections and are right now scheduled to be taken off the voter rolls. It's unusual for people to vote who haven't voted recently. To give you an example, we only had about 400 voters last November who were on the inactive voter list who showed up to vote out of nearly 200,000 such voters. So we're watching those situations. Again, there's nothing criminal about applying to vote. We encourage that, but we do have a responsibility to track these situations and make sure all's on the up and up.
One of the issues you campaigned on during the 2019 election was the need for Kentucky to clean up the voter rolls. How did this process help that for you to achieve that goal?
Well, this was a major concession by the governor. I appreciate him working with me in good faith and understanding that we both had to meet in the middle, and I had to give up on some things, and so did he. I praise him for that. So our voter rolls are out of compliance. We've got well over 100,000 people on our rolls who shouldn't be on our rolls by law, whether because of death or registration to vote in some other state because they moved or what have you. So this agreement advances cleaning up those rolls in two specific ways. Number one, because we are sending a contact to every registered voter in the state, under federal and state law, if we get those postcards received back as undeliverable or not forwardable, we're actually able to put those people on the inactive list too. And that helps us get our rolls cleaned up. Number two, this is actually, I think, a much more significant situation here. So by law, federal and state law, we cannot remove voters without their consent unless they go on our inactive list, as I just described, and then two federal general elections pass and they don't update their registration, they don't vote, they don't respond to our postcard. So the people who get the postcard this year are going to be purged in 2022 after the election, unless they do the next step, which is this. All the people who go on the inactive list, I'm going to personally send correspondence to with a self-addressed letter that says, just so you know, it's not legal to vote in multiple states. And I'll cite the legal authority for that and invite them to sign the letter and send it back to me. And that actually enables me by law to remove them immediately. So my goal is to get as many people off the rolls this year who legally shouldn't be on our rolls because they vote in some other state. I don't think people are trying to be tricky or corrupt and game the system. They just honestly believe they have no obligation to deregister in Kentucky after they've moved to Indiana or Ohio or wherever. But I want to know that they actually need to deregister. We've got to get our rolls up to date. So my hope is to get people off the rolls as soon as this year who should be on the rolls. And the ones who don't respond will come off the rolls in 2022 if they don't vote in that time period.
Kentucky has a new photo ID law, another point that you campaigned on during the election. As you have previously stated, it won't be in effect for this election, June 23rd, but it will be in the future. Why is it needed, and essentially how will it work?
Well, this is probably the signature issue that I ran on. I give it a lot of credit for how I went from 15 points down in August to win 107 counties on election day. It's an issue that voters understand. They understand that they need a photo ID to cash a paycheck, to enter the state capitol, for that matter, to get on an airplane. And we should be just as cautious about protecting the sanctity of our elections as we are about anything else. So the version that we enacted was very humane. I was very clear in the campaign and afterward that this law had to be humane and fair and reasonable. I don't want to disenfranchise anybody. My campaign slogan was make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. Let's do both. I don't want to make it hard to vote for anybody who's legally eligible. So basically what election day will look like in November is this. You're going to have a photo ID to vote. If you have your photo ID, like 99% of Kentuckians do when they vote, there's not a problem. But for those 1%, and this is really important in a state where our governor was elected by 1/3 of a percentage point, where we've got numerous members of our legislature who won by literally 1, 2, 5, 7 votes. We got to have even that 1% verify their identity. So if you vote on election day in November, either you have your photo ID, like most voters do, and you're fine. If you don't have your photo ID, one of two things happens. If you don't have it on you, but you do have an ID, you can vote a provisional ballot. It's cast, it's put in a separate box, and you can come back later with your ID and that vote gets counted. We give you several days after the election, in fact, to do that. But if you don't have a photo ID and you cannot get one because the government has been closed or because you've got some sort of a personal issue that keeps you from being able to acquire a photo ID, a religious objection, or you just can't get your birth certificate or whatever it is, we will still let you vote, but you have to have a non-photo ID. And you have to sign a typical voter form that says that you have a reasonable impediment in getting a photo ID. So we came up with a very humane bill. This actually is a more humane version than even what Indiana had. That went to the U.S. Supreme Court and was sustained by the U.S. Supreme Court back in 2008. I went out of my way to negotiate with the ACLU and other left-leaning interest groups to make sure that we addressed as many of their concerns as we possibly could. And I'm proud that this passed in a bipartisan way. We had Democrats and Republicans voting for this in the House and the Senate. We even had Democrats in both chambers voting for it. And also we had Democrats voting to override the Democratic governor, put this into law. That shows you how supported across party lines this measure was.
Mr. Secretary, we're out of time. Let me thank you for your public service and you're taking time to be with us today for this special segment of Dialogue on Public Issues. Let me close with these comments to our audience. We encourage you to participate, and if you have any questions about the election process, please contact your county clerk's office or the Kentucky Board of Elections, Kentucky Secretary of State websites. This is John Chowning with Dialogue on Public Issues, thanking you, and God bless.